Okay, I think we're live. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Rapid Agency Growth Podcast, where we talk about how you can rapidly grow your agency to 6 and 7 figures in record time. Now, if you are joining us and you are not a part of our Facebook community, that's the SMMA Mastermind. Make sure to find the link above or below this video or go to smmamastermind.com and that should redirect you to the group, especially if you're serious about really growing your agency in 2022. Now, enough of that. I have a very special guest joining me. He's also based in the UK, actually, so it's nice to speak to someone in your same time zone. He has previously built and, managed, shall I say, managed and sold a multi 7 figure business, which had 150 employees. And what we are going to talk about today is how to 10x your productivity as an agency owner. And this is exactly what he specializes in, helping agency owners to boost their performance. Nikul Shah, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Abul. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me. Now, for the people who might not know how you are, who you are, rather, how about a little bit of an introduction?
Sure, perfect. So the long story short, as always, is chartered accountant by background, spent a decade working in the world of investments, private equity, M&A, and the last 5 years was really spent around turning around, buying and then selling businesses all within Africa. And the last year of that, I spent in East Africa, where I was managing a multi 7-figure business hospitality company in Kenya and in South Sudan. So one of the most newest countries in the world. So very interesting stories over there. And really, I went overnight from managing 0 people to then managing a team of 150. So it was quite overwhelming at first because I hadn't had so many different stakeholders to manage. As in, I had team members, I had shareholders, I had consultants, I had clients as well. And so it was quite overwhelming at the beginning, but it was what I needed. I needed to really just jump into it. And then with the help of other mentors and people who have been through this process of managing large teams, that's when I realized that in order to be sustainable at this high level of performance, managing large teams, it isn't just about turning up, because anybody can just turn up in the office, but it's how we turn up. And most importantly, not just one day, 1 week, and then burning out, but over a long stretch of time. And that's really where, I learned firsthand from doing it myself. And then this is what led me down the path of high performance coaching, where I realized that my real passion is that now that I've learned this and done this myself, to help other people do this, other business owners.
No, that's an absolutely awesome journey. Now, you're a chartered accountant by profession. So if anybody should know about efficiency, it should be you guys, right? Now, most of the people that I bring on the show, we talk about, growing a business through client acquisition and tips and tactics and all of that kind of stuff. But as you have quite rightly pointed out, often it is also about how you show up. And we all like to think that we're being productive. And sometimes we're not even aware of the symptoms that maybe we're not. From your experience, what are some of the symptoms that an agency owner who is watching this can kind of identify amongst themselves to kind of then think, actually, maybe I'm not being as productive as I could be?
Sure. And I'll go through a framework, and you can go through it yourself as an agency owner right now. So the first thing to really look at is the time management. So really understanding how am I shaping not just my day, but looking at a week perspective, because we can manage our time from looking at it on a daily basis. We can say, oh, Mondays and Tuesdays are going to be client focused days, whereas Wednesdays and Fridays are going to be focusing on growing the business, for example. So looking at it from that perspective, not just on a daily perspective, but looking from a weekly perspective. So that's one shift from a time perspective. And then drilling down into a daily time frame as well is really looking at where is my energy best suited for certain types of tasks, because this is the biggest one. Because when, for example, looking at contracts and commercials, if I'm looking at contracts and commercials later in the evening or late afternoon, I'm not going to be the most effective. It's going to take me double the amount of time. and I know I should be doing this in the morning, so I need to rejig my whole calendar for that. So the second thing is really looking at how your energy levels are throughout the actual day. And the third thing with this is really following time blocks. So you might have heard of deep work. There are different ways of saying it, but simply if you break it down, it's just following a natural cycle, and it's called ultradian cycle, as in if you look at biological terms. It's very simple, working in 90-minute blocks and then 20 minutes of rest, because this is how we operate throughout the whole day. When we sleep, we have 90-minute stages of sleep, and then we'll go to the next cycle. Same thing happens during the daytime. So for example, in the morning, if I get 2 blocks of 90 minutes with a couple of rests in between, then I know that that's when I'm going to be most focused on. So that's the way that I shape my days, and I learned how to shape it when I was managing the business.
Right. And that's awesome. And this concept that you're touching upon, obviously anybody who's in the self-improvement space, in the personal development space, has come across the whole concept of, kind of working in blocks of time, taking a bit of a break. But, bringing this in and really adopting it, it's a totally different story. How do you go about getting someone to actually, because this is a change management process here, right? How do you get someone to really adopt it?
It's a very good question. And when we break it down from a coaching perspective, it's always looking at, as in going back to the basics, which is what's your vision, what's your goals, and what your values are. And if you break it down from a work perspective, looking at what the goals are, if we know what we are focusing on, and looking at the needle moving activities, so looking at breaking down what the KPIs are. So say looking at the sales funnel, looking at how many leads are coming in, how many conversations are happening, how many calls are coming in. If we focus our time backwards and focusing on just what the activities are which are going to move the needle, then we are more likely to actually put into place this framework. We will then see results.
Mm-hmm. And you kind of touched upon energy levels as well. Now, a lot of people talk about food and diet and exercise. What do you think, is quite effective to maintain your energies throughout the working day? Because surely you can't just get off and run off to the gym, especially if you have a booked calendar. How does one maintain their energy levels so that there isn't like a slump after lunchtime or something like that?
Yeah, sure. So if you look at the 3 ways of increasing our capacity, right? Capacity is about improving and increasing our energy. It does come back down to sleep is the foundation. It comes back down to having the right diet and then exercise. So if you focus on the first thing, which is having a good sleep routine, firstly, it's looking at the evening routine first, and then comes the morning routine, because it's the evening routine which is setting us up for that deep rest which we need for that, say 6 to 8 hours, whatever works for our body. And really it's about looking at what we do and what we don't do. So simple things such as not having caffeine 8 hours before we sleep, not looking at screen half an hour, minimum is half an hour.
Oh God, I'm guilty of all of that.
and also not exercising 2 to 3 hours before we actually go to sleep, because all these things will do is disrupt how we actually sleep. And sleep is when our mind and our body actually rejuvenate. It rejuvenates. So that's the first thing, looking at the morning, looking at the evening routine. Then secondly is looking at the morning routine. And one of the things which in the past year, which I've been really focused on is, since I heard this, so as soon as we go outside and we get natural sunlight into our eyes, that's when our natural body clock, our circadian rhythm, actually starts to rewire itself. And it says, okay, now that I've seen sunlight, 18 hours from now, I know I need to start shutting down. So I know it's in the UK, we don't really have much sunlight until 8 a.m. But if you can get the 8 a.m. sun, then please run outside and get that just for a few minutes.
Right. No, that's absolutely awesome. Now, again, these are big lifestyle changes, and we are creatures of habit, right? How does, because here's the thing, right? When you are because you're a high performance coach, when you're working with someone, right, I'm sure they don't wake up the next day early, or they don't go to bed early the first day they start working with you. How long does it take to really break these habits and start seeing a change in one, our routine, and two, in our bottom line? Because high performance is all about really increasing our profits, right?
Yes. So I think the main thing is, as in, I always work in 90-day periods, but in terms of actually seeing the results, as soon as sleep routines can be adjusted very minutely, as in we can always change one thing. And what I like to do over a period of weeks is layer one habit. As soon as that habit is inbuilt, we don't need to as soon as we don't need to consciously think about something, then we move on to the next habit, and then we lay that on. So say first things I said was looking at sleep. We'd be looking at the evening routine, work on that for a couple of weeks as well. Then the following couple of weeks, work on the morning routine. And then at that point, we should be in a better place where sleep is much higher quality and duration. So at that point, as soon as sleep is fixed, then this will have a knock-on effect on other things, because there'll be more energy. So more energy means high levels of exercise. More exercise means eating more healthier, nutritious food. And then this means that simply we are able to stay energized throughout the day. If we energize, we're more able to stay focused. And by staying focused, a lot of it is about removing distractions. So all of this will help because, for example, if we're focusing on the needle moving activities, we know within a couple of weeks, if our routines are there, then this will have an impact on number of leads, number of calls, number of sales calls, etc. So it will take, say, around a month for at least one habit to transform, and then this will have a knock-on effect on everything else.
Right. And sleep, it's such an important topic, and obviously different people have different opinions on kind of how many hours of sleep we should be getting. In your opinion, how many hours is optimal for peak performance? Because they say, Margaret Thatcher used to sleep for 4 hours a night, and I don't know how one would judge her performance, but she was running a whole country. So can someone be highly effective running on 4 hours of sleep a night, or what's the sweet spot here?
So there's a different way to look at it now. So as I mentioned, our body works in 90-minute blocks. So for example, my sweet spot is 7.5 hours. So that's 5 sleep cycles. Now, if you like, so it could be 6 hours, 7.5 hours, 9 hours. That's the way which I would like to frame it. So if I know that I had a late night, for example, and I sleep at midnight, and I want to go to the gym for the next day, then I'll wake up at 6 o'clock, and because that's the time I need to wake up to go to the gym, and I've had my 4 sleep cycles of sleep. It's as simple as that. So it's very much shifting the narrative in terms of looking at how many hours of sleep or how many blocks of time of sleep can I have.
Right. Okay. So say by some miracle I fix my sleep, and I know that's not going to happen anytime soon. I mean, what's the next area you move on to? Is it the energy part, or what's the next step in the process?
So the first step is always the time management, which we went
Right.
over.
Yes, of course.
Then the second thing is, say our schedule is there. We know what we need to do, when we need to do it, who we're doing it with. Then the next thing is that, again, we can be physically present but mentally absent. And
Yep.
then there's no point of anything even happening. We might not always will be there. So the next real focus is really embedding the fact of managing our distractions. And by distractions, there's 2 types of distractions. One is external distractions, so things such as mobile phone notifications or email pop-ups or people or your animals, your pets. It could be anything. And it's very much so about managing this, what we can do. So simple things such as turning notifications off when we are not on social media for work purposes, of course, or shutting the door to let people know that not to disturb us. Simple things like this will help us manage external distractions.
Right. Okay.
Secondly, we've got internal distractions, and by that, I won't go too deep into it, but the other conversation that happens in our head, right, with ourselves. It can be a lot of things like self-sabotage, negative self-talk, and sometimes I didn't really realize this until I started actually understanding more about how the mind works. One of the first books was the Two Paradox. Don't know if you've read that book.
I've heard of it. I've not read it. I'm more into book summaries more than anything.
Well, I can give you the summary very simply. As in, it's about managing the inner chatter and not really engaging with it. It's one of the metaphors which I heard in Headspace, which is a meditation app, is our mind is like a fire, right? As in, the chatter will happen. If we get engaged with it, all that happens is that fire will burn even brighter, and then we keep on getting distracted in our internal thoughts. Very simple. And the thing is, how do we actually detach ourselves away from this conversation inside? And it's very much about flexing the muscle, which is I like to call single-minded focus muscle. And by this, I mean it's about doing activities where all you're doing is one thing. So it could be, so meditation is a great example because we are sitting there, and for example, it could be purely focusing on the breath. It could be cooking, where all you're doing, well, is chopping, for example. And all these principles, all these activities, what they do is build our muscle, focus on one thing. And again, we bring this example back into our work. If we're focusing on one thing and we aren't getting involved in our inner chatter, that means that we're more focused, there's less errors, higher quality, less time spent working, more time doing other things apart from work. So that's how we bring it back into our work life.
Right. Okay. No, those are some great examples that you've kind of shared there, I suppose. Now, in your experience of working with people, what are some of the common mistakes or challenges you find? I suppose beyond sleep and energy levels. What else is going on in people's worlds that are impacting their performance?
It's a good question. So I feel the last thing, or one of the last things, is to do with structure. Well, it comes back down to the three principles and time management. I think the biggest thing is not structuring the day in the most optimum way. And
Right.
the way that I'd like to give an example, again, practical example where you can implement straight away, is looking at things which I like to call anchors. So anchors are what we do during the day without even realizing. So, for example, we wake up, we go to sleep, and then we'll have various meal patterns. Say, for argument's sake, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This, without realizing it, everybody has structure. It's just that it might not be conscious decision, but everybody does have a structure.
Mm-hmm.
If they are adhering to meal patterns or so.
Sure.
So
or habits of some sort. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All habits create structure of some sort, or unstructured structure.
Yeah.
But say this example, say that the anchors are there. Now the next thing after that, which I like to work with clients, is really looking at looking at the energy levels. So where is it that where you're the most focused? Where is it that you're most creative? And then looking backwards and then time blocking in chunks of time to focus on such tasks. That, I feel, is the biggest needle mover, providing that structure, because then people do not have to think about what to do. It's just about doing it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, maybe I'm oversimplifying it here. So, is it a case of diary management, or is it more than that? I mean, is it a case of getting their EA or their PA or their VA to look at their diaries, take out stuff, delegate stuff? Even that exercise, I suppose, can be quite overwhelming for some people.
That's one part of it. As I mentioned earlier, like one of the main things before we touch the diary management, we need to know what is actually going into the diary. That's when we look at not just the work aspect, but life outside of work. Because one of the things which I like to focus on is looking at the different types of energies which we either use or we consume. So if we look at it, if you look at energy, I like to look at it in terms of three different buckets. So activities which enhance our energy. So all things to do with sleep, nutrition, exercise, as in quality time with friends, with family, hobbies, rest, relaxation. All these things enhance our energy. So that's the first bucket. Second bucket is then energy consuming activities. So what we have to do for our work, the work sessions, meetings, conversations, etc. And then the third bucket is energy depleting activities. So this is everything which causes us stress and anxiety.
Right.
Things such as in too many meetings, for example. It could be not eating the right foods. It could be not around the right people who as in mentally drain you, physically drain you, or so. So it's looking at these three different buckets. So when we look at these three buckets, it's then we can reverse engineer how it is that you want your ideal week to look like, because it's easy to put in things in the diary, but if it doesn't match into
Sure.
how it's actually going to optimize your performance, then there's a mismatch, and that's where the real important work happens. And that's when we look. That's more personal development. So looking at, as I mentioned before, as in the vision, the values, the goals, identity, limiting beliefs, and then using that as a foundation to help with everything else.
Right. And quite a popular topic that's been doing the rounds for maybe the last 12 months or a bit longer than that is biohacking for high performance. What is that all about?
It's a good question, isn't it? Biohacking. As in, for me, biohacking, I haven't looked into too much of this because as in what I feel, I think is all to do with Aura rings and Fitbits and whatnot. And I do feel that if biohacking is this, it does have a place, because I know people that do have Aura rings. I used to have a Fitbit when I was first managing sleep and everything. And I feel everything has a place, because what it does, it helps people establish these good routines, because you're accountable to somebody. Because if you look at your Aura ring score, for example, the sleep score, and you see, oh, I got a 60 yesterday, okay, I'm going to work on that. And then people are more motivated to then improve their sleep routine. So then they get an 80 or a 90 or so. So it's in the Fitbits, the Apple Watches, everything, they do a lot of good. It's just about using them and not getting too stuck into the detail, because a lot of it, I've looked at examples of them, and sometimes I don't understand half of the information that they give.
No, fair enough. I thought you kind of, being in that space might have heard a bit more than the rest of us. Now, I suppose for someone who is watching this, who wants a bit of a kind of to do an audit on themselves, what would be on your checklist? Where do they start? What do they need to really look at to identify that they've actually got an issue here that needs to be dealt with?
Sure. So I think the main things, if you go back to the basics, are, I said, what time waking up, what time going to sleep. Like doing this over 1 to 2 week period and seeing, are these consistent. The third thing is looking at waking up. I said, do I feel energized or do I feel groggy? It's very simple. If you feel groggy for too many days, then something has happened with the sleep. Something needs to be sorted. So that's it from the morning evening routine perspective in terms of quick feedback. And then other quick checks would be just seeing how energy levels are throughout the day. So for every hour, every couple of hours, every hour is ideal. Assessing yourself on a scale of 0 to 10, how do I feel in terms of energy? 0, no energy; 10, high energy. And if it is, say, 5 or below, or so, or 6 or below, constantly throughout the day, then something's missing from the day, because we should be heightening at certain times throughout the day so that we can focus on this most important work.
Right. And obviously, I'm sure you've got plenty of resources for people who might want to know more about all of this, because this is quite an important area, because often we try to think of tactics and strategies to grow our business. What we don't have a strategy for is our own development, and kind of, if you're not showing up right to the meetings, if you're not showing up in front of your team, that's obviously going to have a chain effect, chain reaction on everything else that happens. So if someone who wants to find out more about what you do and kind of how to really take charge, shall I say, where's the best place to get more information or any resources that you might have?
Yeah, sure. So there's another Facebook group which is called as in Focus Mastery for Digital Marketing Agency CEOs. So that's on Facebook, and over there, that's where I do Facebook Lives, free resources out there, and it's just a community for agency owners, digital agency owners, to really take their performance to the next level.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. So you've got the free Facebook group. You can also find Nikul's profile and connect with him there, and
Yes.
find out more about kind of, I suppose, often, what I find is people are not problem aware. That is, there is a problem, but they're not quite aware of it, and often the way they come to realize the problem is when they burn out. And that's when they're thinking about that they're actually doing too much, or something needs to give. Either their health is going to go down the drain, or they can't sustain their business at those levels. Are there any other characteristics, you know before we get to burnout, that someone can identify and think, actually, I need to get some help right now?
Yeah, it's a good one, and I think the main indicators are is it burnout is a result of constant stress. So, for example, if we the the biggest indicators are what we are not doing. So, if we are not taking time to exercise consistently, if we're not taking the time to eat nutrient dense food, if you're not taking the time for prioritizing our sleep, no time for hobbies, no time, quality time with friends and family. If we're not doing these things and we are doing things on the tick list, such as in eating junk food, as in junk food meaning food which is not nutrient dense. If we're not having a consistent sleep routine, if we aren't having time for our hobbies, or no time for as in friends and family, as I said, as in all these things uh, produce a build-up, and
Mhm.
because as I mentioned, as in we've got three different buckets of activities for energy, and if we aren't having enough energy enhancing activities, all that's doing is that we're just consuming and depleting energy, and until unfortunately there's no more energy to give, and then that results in burnout. So it's really looking at ourselves and seeing, am I actually spending time on myself?
Mhm. Right. And as we've been having this conversation, honestly, right, red flags have been going off in my head, as you can imagine. And I'm guessing some of the people who have been watching this, red flags might have been going off in their head, because we don't take certain things seriously. We all believe we're Superman or Supergirl, or whatever, that we can kind of always be highly productive regardless of external circumstances. We're resilient and whatnot. So hopefully this serves as a bit of a wake-up call. So, if you feel like your performance is uh, not where it should be, check out Nikul. Nikul, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Abul.